Hi everyone, this chapter is very important because it's actually a continuation of chapter 12. It's still, sometimes it may be very hard to understand the relation between saving and investment through the financial system. As you remember in chapter 12, we talk about how we can affect the living standards of a country, and one of the important determinant of living standards or the GDP income level, as you remember, is the investment. So now we are going to make a connection between saving and investment through the financial system and try to understand this gap that is not mentioned in chapter 12. Let's start with an example. Imagine that you have just graduated from a college and you decided to start your own business. Let's say it's an economic forecasting firm. Before you make any money selling your forecast, you have to have some cost to set up your business. You have to buy computers, which you make your forecast, as well as desk, chairs, and filing cabinets to furnish your new office. So, how can you finance this cost? You can get, perhaps you may have your past savings, so you can use your past savings. Or more likely, like most entrepreneurs, you do not have enough money for your own to finance the start of your business. As a result, you have to get the money you need from other resources. Okay? So the financial system is the definition of financial system is the group of institutions that helps match saving of one person with the investment of another. At the broadest level, the financial system moves the economy's scarce resources from savers, savers are the people who spend less than they earn, to borrowers, people who spend more than they earn. Savers save for various reasons: to put a child through college in several years or to retire comfortably in several decades. Similarly, borrowers borrow for various reasons: to buy a house in which to live or to start a business with which to make a living. And savers in this chapter supply their money to the financial system with the expectation that they will get it back with an interest at a later date. On the other hand, borrowers demand money from the financial system with the knowledge they will be required to pay it back with the interest at a later date. And financial markets are the institutions through which savers can directly provide funds to borrowers. The first example of the financial market is the bond market. So let's start with a simple example. When Intel company, the giant maker of computer chips, wants to borrow to finance construction of a new factory, it can borrow directly from the public. How? It does by selling bonds. So what is a bond? Bond is a certificate of indebtedness that specifies the obligation of the borrower to the holder. Let me try to show you how the bonds look like. Okay, let's say bond is a paper. Okay, here is paper. I'm giving you a paper in exchange for, let's say, Intel needs $1,000. So I'm giving you that paper. In exchange for $1,000, you give me $1,000. So the bond is simply an IOU. I owe you. So I got $1,000, which we call this $1,000 as the principal amount. Principal, which is the initial amount of borrowing. Principal. And then somebody give $1,000 to Intel in expectation of getting some interest rate. So this bond pays an interest rate, let's say 10% annually. And also, there is a date on the bond. It identifies the time at which the loan will be repaid, called date of maturity. Let's say this bond is until April 2017. So that means this bond, the Intel is going to make the payment, full payment, until April 2017. Okay? So you can find different kinds of bonds in an economy. If you look at the Wall Street Journal or the business section of your local newspaper, you will find a listing of the price and interest rates on some of the most important bond issues. These bonds differ according to three significant characteristics. Let's talk about them. First, let me erase this part. Okay. The first characteristics is the bond term. Bond term. So what is bond term? The length of time until the bond matures. Okay, some bonds have short terms, like in 3 months. You give money to a company and the company promises to pay you in 3 months. So the maturity date is in 3 months. Or some bonds as long as 30 years. And even the British government has even issued a bond that never matures called perpetuity. This bond pays interest rate forever, but the principal is never paid. So the interest rate on a bond depends in part on its term. Long-term bonds, long-term LR, long-term bonds are more riskier than short-term bonds because holders of long-term bonds have to wait longer for repayment of principal. Okay, if a holder of a long-term bond needs his money earlier than the distant date of maturity, he has no choice but to sell the bond to someone else, perhaps at a reduced price. Let's say you give money to Intel $1,000 for 30 years. 30 years. But you need money suddenly, something happened in your financial status, you want to get back your money. You need to wait 30 years to get that money. Or you can sell the bond at the bond market with a reduced rate because before the maturity date you are selling it. So as you see, it's more risky because of the financial situation of the lender may change. Long-term bonds are more riskier than short-term bonds. Okay. Let me erase this one. This was the first characteristics, and the second one we are going to talk about the bonds is the credit risk. Second characteristics of a bond. So the second characteristic is the credit risk. What does that mean? The probability that the borrower will fail to pay some of the interest or principal. Such a failure to pay is called a default. Borrowers can default on their loans by declaring bankruptcy. Okay. When bond buyers perceive that the probability of default is high, they demand high risk. And because, for instance, US government is considered a safe credit risk, government bonds tend to pay low interest rate. But on the other hand, financially shaky corporations raise money by issuing junk bonds. Junk bonds pay high interest rate because of the possibility that the borrower is not going to make the payment. Okay, so this is the credit risk. Third is the tax treatment. Tax treatment of a bond may be different. So what does that mean? The way the tax laws treat the interest earned on the bond. Most of the bonds that you earn interest, you have to pay tax to the government from your return on the bond, which is the interest rate. But there are some bonds that you don't have to pay interest, a tax on the interest, which we call these bonds as municipal bonds. The bond owners are not required to pay federal income tax on interest income. Because of this tax advantage, bonds issued by the state and local government typically pay a lower interest rate than the bonds issued by corporations or the federal government. So there are three important characteristics of a bond that make it bond different than the others. The first one is the term, the second one is the credit risk, and the third one is the tax treatment. So next, we are going to talk about the second financial market, which is the stock market. Stock market is different than financial market. I'm going to talk about the reasons why it is different. But I'm assuming that everyone knows what is the definition of a stock. Or I can make the definition to make sure that you know what is a stock. Stock represents ownership in a firm and is therefore a claim to the profits that the firm makes. For example, if Intel sells a total of 1 million shares of stock, then each share represents ownership of 1/1 million of the business. So if you could get one share, then you are getting 1/1 billion of the business. So you're becoming an ownership of the business. Although your share is very small, you are the owner. So the sale of stock to raise money is called equity finance, whereas the sale of bonds is called debt finance. And corporations use both debt and equity finance, but there are differences between this debt financing through the bonds and equity financing through stock. The owner of shares of Intel stock is a part owner of Intel, while the owner of an Intel bond is a creditor of corporation. So when you have the stock, you become an owner of the company. But if you buy the bonds, you become only the creditor of the corporation. You're not part of the corporation. If Intel is very profitable, the stockholders enjoy the benefits of profit because you are now a part of the company, whereas the bondholders get only the interest on their bond. You are not part of the profit. Okay? And if Intel runs into financial difficulty, the bondholders are paid what they are due before stockholders receive anything at all. Compared to bonds from that perspective, stocks offer the holder both higher risks and potentially higher return. So the bond pays you constant return, which is the interest rate written on the bond. The stock, when you own the stock, you may get higher returns because you become a shareholder of the corporation. If the company gets more profitable, you get more return if you buy the stock of a company. Okay? So the next thing we are going to look at is the financial intermediaries. They are financial institutions through which savers can indirectly borrow funds to borrowers. The term intermediary reflects the role of these institutions in standing between savers and borrowers. Here we are going to consider two financial intermediaries. The first one is bank and the second one is mutual funds. So we learn to market financial markets, bonds market and stock markets, but if you are a small business owner, you cannot issue a bond to raise money, or you cannot sell your stocks in the market. So the banks are the financial intermediaries that you can indirectly provide you funds. The financial markets, they provide you money directly, but in financial intermediaries, savers can indirectly, using one institution or financial intermediary to give you money. So let's make an example. You are a small grocery and wants to finance an expansion of your business. You probably take a lot of quite different from that of Intel, because Intel can issue bond, also can sell the stocks of the company. But most of the buyers of stocks and bonds prefer to buy those issued by larger and more familiar companies. The small grocer therefore most likely finances his business expansion with a loan from a bank. So the financial banks are financial intermediaries with which people are most familiar. A primary job of the banks is to take in deposits from people who wants to save and use this deposit to make loans to people who want to borrow. Banks pay depositors interest on their deposits and charge borrowers slightly higher interest rate on their loans. So the interest rate differences will be the bank's profit. Okay. And the second financial intermediary is the mutual funds, institutions that sell shares to public and use the proceeds to buy portfolios of stocks and bonds. So here is maybe portfolio. What is a portfolio? Portfolio includes various types of stocks, bonds, or both stocks and bonds. So the aim of portfolio is the company mutual fund is buying different portfolios to diversify your risk, because you put your money in different mutual funds, implying that you are buying different kinds of bonds and stocks to diversify your risk through different assets. So again, you are indirectly providing funds to the borrowers through the mutual funds. So that is the difference between financial intermediaries and the financial markets. Okay.